Hey again, guys. Do you know what I like to do when the Ticket Leprechaun is having a contest? I like to look at some baseball cards. So the contest is to tell a story about a card or cards in your collection. And it's more about the story than the card, really. So I thought I would tell this story. I often tell you guys when I was growing up that I was a baseball fanatic. I grew up in the country outside of Pittsburgh in western Pennsylvania. I grew up in Youngwood, PA, which is where George Blanda is from. And we were a small little town, and we had a fire hall that was down the hill from me, over the railroad tracks, about a mile from my house. But we had a path through the woods, and us kids, we would grab our change and go down there and walk to stores and buy baseball cards and candy and everything in the summer almost every day. And on Sundays they had a flea market at the fire hall, and we would walk down there every Sunday morning. We would go. I had a friend, and he had to go to church, and I remember when I first got my driver's license when I was 16, we wanted to go to the flea market instead, but he had to come home with a bulletin from the Catholic church that we went to. And I would pull up in front of the church, and he would run in, and he would grab a bulletin and run right back out, get in the car, and we'd go to the fire hall, and we'd buy some baseball cards. So that's where the only place I could find vintage cards back then. And of course, my friends they knew all about the new modern players of that time. They'd buy up the Steve Garveys of the world, Dave Parker, those kinds of guys, and I did too. But I read baseball card books for the time I could read, and my dad would tell me about old baseball players, so I had read or heard about all the old players, and I knew who they were, and my friends really didn't, so I didn't really have any competition with them on buying the older cards. And so, of course, I was a Clemente fan, and we all were. Clementes were not easy to come by. It wasn't. I don't remember buying very many of them back then. They were even, pricey for me. We'd buy Bill Mazeroski, and most of the first cards I got were Hank Aaron and Willie Mays, because believe it or not, they were actually cheaper in the Pittsburgh area than Clemente was. And so I had, Clemente, Aaron, Mays all represented in my collection. But I found this Mickey Mantle. It was a 1967 Mickey Mantle card. And man, this thing just was pack fresh. I mean, as I, had it in my collection, I learned to appreciate the condition of it more and more. I couldn't believe it. It looked like it came right out of a pack. It was the best conditioned card I had. So I played baseball in town, and there were kids that lived down in the town who played ball with me. One of them was the son of a coach. And I was fortunate. I had two coaches that played minor league baseball. And his father taught him to throw a curveball when we were in Little League. And one year I caught, and he couldn't throw hard, but nobody could hit this breaking ball because, it broke this far, and we were in Little League, people would bail out, he'd throw it at them, and it would go right across the plate. So I was always two. There's no way I was giving him the number 1 too often because, good hitters would shellac it. So anyway, these guys found out that I had this big baseball card collection. Other kids started to hear about my baseball card collection because when I was young and where I grew up, cards were basically like currency, right? It was like you were kind of judged by who had the best baseball card collection. And so one day they wanted to walk to my house, and man, it had to be at least 1.5 miles from their homes. And they walked up to my house, they wanted to see my cards, and they wanted to do a little trading. Now, at that time, that was the only Mickey Mantle I had in my collection. I wasn't really big on buying Mantle cards back then. Like I said, I was more big on buying the Pirates and Hank Aaron and Willie Mays. But it was the only one I had in my collection, and I've always been the kind of person that wants to have all the big players represented in my collection. And so the one kid was just enamored with this Mickey Mantle. He just had to have it. And he was pressing me, and I didn't like to trade much unless I had doubles. We used to flip. and played different games. We'd line them up against a wall, and you'd throw them like a frisbee, and whatever cards you knocked down, you got to keep. We play that all the time. Of course, we didn't pay much mind to condition, but we wouldn't do that with our best cards. And so since this was my only Mickey Mantle, I was reluctant. I didn't want to trade, and he was trying to trade me a Clemente straight up and a Mays straight up, and I kept turning him down, and finally he offered me a Clemente and a Mays. I think it was a 65 Clemente and a 66 or 68 Mays for the Mantle. And so I really couldn't turn that down, so I did the trade. But afterwards, and it wasn't that I wasn't happy with the trade, but I just regretted that I no longer had a Mickey Mantle. And so I would go to that flea market week in and week out looking for another 67 Mantle to add to my collection because I regretted, I missed it. I wanted to have it in my collection. So I finally found one. And I remember it was $15, which was a lot of money back then, but I showed out the $15 for this card and I got it. And it was in really nice condition, but I just noticed it wasn't as nice as the one I traded away. And so when grading first came out, I submitted this thing as, I believe it was my first submission ever to SGC. And I got it back, and it came back as a 7, which having that from my childhood, I was happy with, but it only makes me wonder what the other one would have graded because I know it was sharper than this one. And so that is my story. Congratulations on your subs. Thanks for watching.